The flickering fluorescent lights of the research facility hummed a monotonous tune, a soundtrack to the unease gnawing at Dr. Eris Thorne. He adjusted his glasses, the cool metal of the frame a small comfort against his sweaty palms. Before him, the observation window offered a clear view into the adjacent room, a sterile, white space that held the key to humanity's future or its utter annihilation. Inside, strapped to a cold, metallic table, lay a young man, no more than 25, named Kai. Kai wasn't a soldier, a scientist, or even particularly remarkable in any way. He was, for lack of a better term, a volunteer. Or, as some of the more cynical members of the project called him, a sacrifice. Eris watched as Kai shifted uncomfortably, the thin cotton gown he wore doing little to shield him from the chill of the room. The young man's eyes darted around, taking in the gleaming instruments, the blank walls, the ever-present, watchful cameras. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. Eris knew what Kai was thinking. He'd seen that same fear in the eyes of the other subjects, the ones who had come before. But Kai, unlike the others, was different. His genetic markers, his physiological responses, they were all off the charts. He was the perfect specimen. The chosen one. Or, more accurately, the chosen breeding bull. This wasn't some backwater government experiment, some rogue scientist's pet project. This was Project Chimera, humanity's last, desperate gamble. The Earth was dying. Resources were depleted, the climate was in chaos, and disease ran rampant. But the biggest threat, the one that overshadowed all the others, was infertility. Humanity was simply stopping. Birth rates had plummeted to near zero across the globe. No one knew why. Scientists had theorized about everything from environmental toxins to some unknown virus, but the cause remained elusive. And without children, there was no future. Then came the visitors. They arrived not with fire and brimstone, but with an offer. A deal, really? They were a race known as the HFY, tall and elegant, with skin that shimmered like polished obsidian and eyes that burned with an unnerving intelligence. They, too, were facing a population crisis. Their biology was incompatible with Earth's. They couldn't reproduce here. But they could, they claimed, use human genetic material to create a viable hybrid. A new generation. A shared future. The HFY's technology was beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. They offered solutions to Earth's environmental problems, cures for its diseases, and the promise of a new era of prosperity. In exchange, they needed partners. Specifically, genetically compatible human males. Breeding bulls. The world governments, desperate for any hope, agreed. Project Chimera was born. And Kai, with his extraordinary genetic makeup, was the prime candidate. He was the key to humanity's survival, or its final, ignominious end. Eris sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. He felt a pang of guilt as he watched Kai's anxiety escalate. He tried to talk to the young man, to explain the importance of what he was doing, the sacrifice he was making. But how could anyone truly understand the weight of such a burden? To be reduced to a biological function, a vessel for reproduction? It was a dehumanizing concept, even in the face of extinction. The door behind Eris hissed open, and Dr. Lyra Vance, the project's lead geneticist, entered the observation room. Her expression was tight, her usually vibrant green eyes clouded with worry. "The HFY delegation is here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're ready to begin the procedure." Eris nodded, his stomach twisting into knots. He glanced back at Kai, who was now staring straight ahead, his face pale and drawn. The young man's eyes met Eris's for a fleeting moment, and Eris saw a flicker of something there, something beyond fear. Resignation. "Have they confirmed the compatibility?" Eris asked, turning to Lyra. "Yes," she replied. "Kai is a perfect match." His genetic markers aligned with the KRYLs in an unprecedented way. He's ideal. Eris didn't like the word ideal. It sounded clinical, cold. It stripped Kai of his humanity, reducing him to a set of data points. He was more than just a collection of genes. He was a person. A young man with hopes and dreams, with a family, with a life that was about to be irrevocably changed. What about the procedure itself? Eris asked, his voice catching in his throat. Lyra hesitated. The KRYL have assured us that it's painless, she said. They've described it as a merging. A joining. Eris frowned. A merging? A joining? The terms were vague, unsettling. He pressed the KRYL for more details, but they'd been evasive, claiming that the process was too complex for human understanding. They'd only said that it was a sacred ritual for them, a vital part of their reproductive cycle. A low hum resonated through the facility, a sound that Eris had come to dread. It was the KRYL ship, descending to the landing platform. The time had come. They're here, Lyra said, her voice trembling slightly. Eris took one last look at Kai, who was now lying perfectly still, his eyes closed. He looked almost peaceful, as if he'd finally accepted his fate. But Eris knew that beneath that facade of tranquility, there was a storm raging. A storm of fear, of uncertainty, of the unknown. The door to the observation room opened, and a tall, imposing figure entered. It was Xylo, the KRYL ambassador. His obsidian skin shimmered under the fluorescent lights, and his eyes, those piercing, intelligent eyes, seemed to bore into Eris's soul. Dr. Thorne, Xylo said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone. Dr. Vance. We are ready. Eris nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that this was it. The moment of truth. The fate of humanity rested on the shoulders of this young man, on Kai, the chosen breeding bull. Xylo gestured towards the door leading to the procedure room. Please, he said. Join us. Eris and Lyra followed Xylo into the room. The air was thick with anticipation, with a sense of both hope and dread. Kai was still lying on the table, his eyes closed. Around him, several KRYL technicians, their movements fluid and graceful, were preparing the equipment. Eris watched as Xylo approached Kai. He reached out a long, slender hand and gently touched the young man's forehead. Kai's eyes fluttered open. He looked up at Xylo, his expression unreadable. Xylo smiled, a slow, deliberate movement that sent a shiver down Eris's spine. The merging will now begin, he said, his voice echoing through the room. Suddenly, the lights in the room began to flicker and dim. A low, pulsating hum filled the air, growing louder and louder. Eris felt a strange tingling sensation coursing through his body. He looked at Lyra, who was staring at Kai with wide, terrified eyes. Then, everything went black. Eris blinked, trying to clear his vision. He could hear a faint ringing in his ears. He looked around the room. The KRYL technicians were gone. Xylo was gone. Lyra was gone. Only Kai remained, still lying on the table. But something was different. Kai's eyes were no longer closed. They were wide open, and they glowed with an eerie, otherworldly light. His skin seemed to shimmer, mirroring the obsidian sheen of the KRYL. And from his lips, a single word escaped, a word that Eris didn't understand, but that filled him with a primal, gut-wrenching fear. The word was KRYL. The single word KRYL hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was a transformation. Kai's voice, once soft and hesitant, now resonated with an alien authority. His gaze, no longer filled with fear, held a cold, calculating intensity that made Eris's blood run cold. He took a step back, his heart hammering against his ribs. What had happened? What had the KRYL done to him? Lyra reappeared, stumbling back into the room as if she'd been thrown. Her face was ashen, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Eris, she whispered, her voice trembling. Did you see? Eris nodded, unable to speak. He couldn't tear his eyes away from Kai. The young man was no longer human, not entirely. He was something else. The lights flickered again, and the room was plunged into darkness for a split second. When the emergency lights kicked in, casting the room in a sickly yellow glow, Kai was gone. The table was empty. The restraints lay coiled on the floor. He's escaped, Lyra stammered, her eyes darting around the room. Eris felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. He couldn't understand what was happening. The KRYL had assured them that the procedure was safe, controlled. They'd said that Kai would remain compliant. We have to find him, Eris said, his voice hoarse. He can't be loose. They searched the room, but there was no sign of Kai. The only clue was the faint, almost imperceptible scent of something metallic and alien, lingering in the air. It was a scent that Eris had smelled before, in the KRYL embassy, a scent that made his skin crawl. They alerted the security team, but it was too late. Kai was gone. He'd vanished without a trace, as if he'd simply ceased to exist. The following days were a blur of frantic activity. The research facility was locked down, every room searched, every corridor scrutinized. But Kai was nowhere to be found. The KRYL delegation, when questioned, remained tight-lipped, claiming that they had no knowledge of Kai's whereabouts. They reiterated their earlier statements about the procedure, insisting that it was a merging, a joining, not a transformation. But Eris knew they were lying. He'd seen the change in Kai's eyes, the shift in his demeanor. He'd heard that word, KRYL, spoken in a voice that was both familiar and alien. The incident sent shockwaves through the world. The already fragile trust between humanity and the KRYL was shattered. Conspiracy theories ran rampant, fueled by fear and suspicion. Some believed that the KRYL had betrayed them, that they'd used Project Chimera as a cover for some sinister purpose. Others claimed that Kai had become a weapon, a Trojan horse, sent by the KRYL to infiltrate human society. Eris found himself caught in the middle of the storm. He was questioned by government officials, interrogated by intelligence agencies, grilled by journalists. Everyone wanted to know what had happened to Kai. Everyone wanted answers. But Eris had no answers. He only had questions. What had the KRYL done to Kai? Where was he now? And what did it all mean for the future of humanity? He spent countless nights poring over his research notes, trying to piece together the puzzle. He reviewed the genetic data, the physiological readings, the recordings of Kai's interactions with the KRYL. He searched for any clue, any hint of what had happened during the procedure. Lyra, too, was consumed by the mystery. She felt responsible, guilty. She'd been the lead geneticist, the one who had identified Kai as the perfect candidate. She'd believed that she was helping to save humanity. Now, she wasn't so sure. One evening, Eris and Lyra were working late in the lab, surrounded by stacks of research papers and computer screens filled with complex genetic diagrams. They were both exhausted, both frustrated. There has to be something we missed, Lyra said, rubbing her tired eyes. Some detail, some anomaly. Eris nodded. I agree. The KRYL's explanations don't make sense. Their technology is so advanced, so far beyond our understanding. They could have done anything to Kai. But why? Lyra asked. Why would they do this? What do they gain by turning him into whatever he is? Eris didn't have an answer. He only had a growing sense of dread. He felt like they were playing a game with rules they didn't understand, against an opponent they couldn't see. Suddenly, Lyra gasped. Eris, look at this. She pointed to a section of Kai's genetic data. These markers, she said. They're unlike anything I've ever seen. They're not human. They're not. even remotely similar to any known terrestrial DNA. Eris leaned closer, his heart pounding. What are they? I don't know, Lyra admitted. But I think they might be KRYL DNA. Eris stared at the data, his mind reeling. If Lyra was right, it meant that the KRYL hadn't just merged with Kai. They'd altered him. They'd rewritten his genetic code. They'd turned him into something hybrid. But why? He repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Why would they do this? Lyra shook her head. I don't know. But I have a feeling. I have a feeling that Kai is more important than we ever imagined. Just then, the lab's security system went off, blaring an alarm. A red light flashed on the control panel. Intruder alert, a computerized voice announced. Sector 7. Sector 7 was the secure storage area where they kept the samples of KRYL genetic material. Eris and Lyra exchanged a look of fear. They knew who it was. It could only be one person. Kai. They rushed out of the lab, heading towards Sector 7. As they approached the secure area, they could hear a commotion inside. The sounds of breaking glass, the shouts of security guards. They reached the door to Sector 7 and found it hanging open, the lock smashed. Inside, the room was in chaos. Shelves had been overturned, equipment smashed. And in the center of the room, standing amidst the wreckage, was Kai. He was no longer wearing the hospital gown. He was dressed in black, his movements fluid and graceful, almost predatory. His eyes glowed with that eerie, otherworldly light. He held a small vial in his hand, filled with a shimmering, iridescent liquid. KRYL genetic material. He turned to face Eris and Lyra, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone radiated a power, a threat, that was more terrifying than any words. Then, he vanished again. Just like before, he was simply gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of metal and alien. Eris and Lyra stared at the empty space where Kai had been standing, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew that this was just the beginning. Kai was out there somewhere. And they had no idea what he was planning. They only knew that whatever it was, it couldn't be good. The world had just become a much more dangerous place. The chosen breeding bull had become something else entirely. A harbinger of what? They didn't know. But the fear that gripped them was absolute. The stolen vial of KRYL genetic material was a chilling reminder of the unknown. Eris and Lyra knew they had to understand what Kai was planning, but they were facing an enemy they barely comprehended. He wasn't just a human anymore, he was something more. Something alien. The merging, or whatever the KRYL had called it, had fundamentally changed him. They intensified their research, delving deeper into the intricacies of KRYL biology, trying to decipher the secrets hidden within the stolen genetic material. They worked day and night, fueled by caffeine and a growing sense of dread. The world outside was gripped by fear. News reports were filled with speculation about Kai, some painting him as a monster, others as a victim. The KRYL remained silent, their embassy a fortress of impenetrable secrets. Eris felt the weight of responsibility crushing him. He'd been the one to push for Project Chimera, driven by the desperate hope of saving humanity. Now, he feared he'd unleashed something far more dangerous than extinction. He'd opened a Pandora's box, and he had no idea how to close it. Lyra, ever the scientist, approached the problem with a clinical detachment, but Eris could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear that gnawed at him. They were racing against time, trying to understand the KRYL's motives, trying to anticipate Kai's next move. They discovered that the KRYL genetic material Kai had stolen was a specific sequence, a blueprint for something vital. It was a key, but a key to what? They ran simulations, analyzed the data, but the answers remained elusive. Meanwhile, strange occurrences began. to happen around the world. Crop failures, unusual weather patterns, outbreaks of bizarre illnesses. The delicate balance of the earth seemed to be unraveling. Some whispered that it was a sign of the impending apocalypse, others blamed the HFY, claiming they were manipulating the planet's ecosystem for their own purposes. Eris and Lyra suspected that these events were connected to Kai, to the HFY's presence on Earth. They felt a growing sense of urgency. They had to stop him, but they didn't know how. He was like a ghost, appearing and disappearing at will, leaving behind only chaos and fear. One night, Eris had a breakthrough. He was reviewing the data from Kai's initial examination, the genetic markers that Lyra had identified as being of HFY origin. He noticed a pattern, a recurring sequence that he'd overlooked before. It was a code, a biological code. He cross-referenced the code with the information they had on HFY biology, and a chilling realization dawned on him. The stolen genetic material wasn't just a key. It was a component. A building block. It was necessary for something bigger. He shared his findings with Lyra, who confirmed his suspicions. The HFY were building something. Something on a massive scale. Something that required human genetic material, specifically Kai's unique genetic makeup. But what are they building? Lyra asked, her voice trembling. Eris didn't answer. He knew the answer, but he was afraid to say it aloud. He looked at Lyra, and he saw the same realization reflected in her eyes. They were building a hybrid. A new species. A combination of human and HFY DNA. And Kai was the progenitor. The implications were staggering. The HFY weren't just trying to save their own species. They were creating something new. Something that could potentially replace humanity. They knew they had to act, but they were running out of time. They had to find Kai, they had to stop him, before it was too late. But he was always one step ahead, a phantom moving through the shadows. Then, they received a message. It was a communication from the HFY embassy, a summons. They were requesting a meeting. Eris and Lyra were hesitant. They knew it was a trap, but they had no choice. They had to go. They had to find out what the HFY were planning. They arrived at the embassy, a sleek, obsidian structure that seemed to hum with an alien energy. They were escorted into a large, circular room, where Xylo, the HFY ambassador, awaited them. He greeted them with a polite smile, but Eris could see the coldness in his eyes. Dr. Thorne, Xylo said, his voice smooth and resonant. Dr. Vance. We have been expecting you. What do you want? Eris asked, his voice tight. Xylo gestured towards a large screen that dominated one side of the room. We want to show you the future, he said. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of images. Eris and Lyra gasped. They were images of a new world, a world where humans and HFY lived together in harmony. A world where disease and poverty had been eradicated. A world where humanity had entered a new era of prosperity. This is what we offer you, Xylo said. A shared future. A future where your species will thrive. At what cost? Eris asked. Xylo's smile faltered. A small sacrifice, he said. A necessary step. Lyra said. What have you done to him? Xylo's expression hardened. He has fulfilled his purpose, he said. He has become the progenitor of a new age. Eris felt a wave of anger wash over him. He knew what the HFY were planning. They were going to use Kai to create their hybrid race, and they were going to replace humanity. We won't let you do it, Eris said. Xylo chuckled. You have no choice, he said. The process has already begun. It cannot be stopped. Just then, the ground began to shake. The room vibrated with a low, pulsating hum. The screen flickered again, and this time, it displayed a single image. An image of Kai. He was no longer the young man they had known. He was taller, stronger, his features altered, enhanced. He was a hybrid, a creature of both human and KRYL DNA. He looked directly at Eris and Lyra, his eyes glowing with that eerie, otherworldly light. And he spoke. "The merging is complete," he said, his voice echoing through the room. "The new age has begun." The screen went black. The room fell silent. Eris and Lyra stared at each other, their faces pale with fear. They knew that the climax was upon them. The future of humanity hung in the balance. The chosen breeding bull had become something else entirely. A god? A monster? They didn't know. But they knew one thing: they had to stop him, no matter the cost. The fate of the world depended on it. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the KRYL technology. Eris and Lyra exchanged a look of sheer terror. Kai's words, "The merging is complete. The new age has begun," echoed in their minds, a chilling prophecy of humanity's potential obsolescence. They had to escape, to warn the world, but they knew Xylo wouldn't let them leave. "You cannot interfere," Xylo said, his voice laced with a newfound coldness. "This is the natural order of things. The next stage of evolution." "Evolution?" Eris scoffed. "You call this evolution? Replacing us with your hybrids?" Xylo shrugged. "Survival of the fittest, Dr. Thorne. A concept your species understands well. We offer a better future, a stronger future." Lyra stepped forward, her voice surprisingly steady. "You're playing God, Xylo. You're manipulating life, twisting it to your own ends." Xylo's eyes flashed. "We are simply ensuring our survival. And in doing so, we offer your species a chance to transcend its limitations." Before Eris or Lyra could respond, the ground began to shake again, more violently this time. The lights flickered, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. The screen on the wall came back to life, displaying a chaotic scene. It was Kai, but he wasn't alone. He was surrounded by other hybrids, creatures like him, a terrifying mix of human and KRYL DNA. They were taller, stronger, their eyes glowing with the same eerie light as Kai's. They moved with a fluid grace, an almost predatory elegance. "What's happening?" Eris demanded, his voice trembling. Xylo's expression was unreadable. "The transformation is accelerating," he said. "The hybrids are maturing." Suddenly, the screen displayed a new image, a map of the world. Red dots began to appear, spreading across the continents like a virus. "What are those?" Lyra asked, her voice filled with dread. "Those are the emergence points," Xylo replied. "The hybrids are awakening. They are spreading across the globe." Eris felt a wave of nausea wash over him. The KRYL weren't just creating a new species. They were unleashing an army. An army of hybrids, controlled by Kai, ready to replace humanity. "You've doomed us," Eris said, his voice hoarse. "You've condemned us to extinction." Xylo remained silent, his gaze fixed on the screen, where the red dots continued to multiply. Then, something unexpected happened. The screen flickered again, and a new image appeared. It was Kai, but he wasn't in the midst of the other hybrids. He was alone, standing in a large, empty room. He looked directly at the camera, his eyes burning with an intensity that made Eris's blood run cold. "Xylo," Kai said, his voice echoing through the room. "You have deceived me." Xylo's eyes widened in surprise. "What? What are you talking about?" he stammered. "You told me that this was a merging," Kai said. "A joining of our species." "But it's not. It's a takeover." Xylo's face paled. You misunderstand," he said. Kai shook his head. "I understand perfectly. You used me. You used my genetic material to create your army. And now you intend to control them." Xylo tried to speak, but Kai cut him off. "I will not be a pawn in your game," he said. "I will not be a puppet." The screen went black again. The room fell silent. Eris and Lyra stared at Xylo, who was now visibly shaken. "What? What was that?" Lyra asked, her voice barely. A whisper. Xylo's face was a mask of fear. He has access to the network," he said. "He can control the hybrids." Eris felt a glimmer of hope. Kai wasn't cooperating with the HFY. He was rebelling. But against whom? The HFY? Or humanity? Suddenly, the embassy's security system went off, blaring an alarm. "Breach detected," a computerized voice announced. "Multiple intruders. Hybrid lifeforms." Xylo's eyes widened in panic. "They're here," he said. "They're attacking." The door to the room burst open, and several hybrids stormed in, their eyes glowing with that eerie light. They moved with incredible speed and strength, easily overpowering the HFY's security guards. Eris and Lyra knew they had to escape. They had to get out of the embassy before it was overrun. They made a run for the back door, dodging the hybrids as they fought their way through the corridors. As they reached the exit, they saw Kai standing there, blocking their path. He looked at them, his expression unreadable. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice calm, almost curious. Eris and Lyra froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew that their fate rested in his hands. He could kill them, or he could let them go. He was the key to everything. We just want to leave," Eris stammered. Kai nodded slowly. "Leave," he repeated. "Yes. You can leave." He stepped aside, allowing them to pass. Eris and Lyra didn't hesitate. They ran out of the embassy, into the night, their minds reeling. They had escaped, but they knew that the real battle was just beginning. Kai was out there, in control of the hybrid army. The world had changed forever. The chosen breeding bull had become something far more powerful, something unpredictable. And humanity was caught in the middle, facing a threat unlike any they had ever encountered. The climax was coming, and they had no idea what it would bring. Eris and Lyra stumbled out of the HFY embassy, gasping for breath, the image of Kai's cold, calculating eyes burned into their minds. They knew they had to warn the world, but who would believe them? The HFY had presented themselves as saviors, offering solutions to Earth's problems. Now, they were revealed as conquerors, and humanity was facing a threat from within, an army of hybrids controlled by a man who was no longer entirely human. They managed to reach a secure communication line and contacted the Global Defense Network. They relayed their findings, the truth about the HFY, about Kai, about the hybrid army. Initially, they were met with skepticism, disbelief. But the escalating reports of hybrid sightings, the widespread chaos and panic, soon lent credence to their claims. The world's governments finally recognized the gravity of the situation. They mobilized their forces, preparing for a war against an enemy they barely understood. But how do you fight an enemy that looks like you, that blends seamlessly into the population? How do you fight an enemy that possesses superhuman strength and speed, controlled by a man who has access to their technology, their networks? Eris and Lyra worked tirelessly, trying to develop a countermeasure, a way to neutralize the hybrid threat. They analyzed the HFY genetic material, searching for a weakness, a vulnerability. They knew that Kai was the key. If they could somehow sever his connection to the hybrids, they might have a chance. Meanwhile, Kai and his hybrid army were wreaking havoc across the globe. They were targeting key infrastructure, disrupting communication networks, sowing chaos and fear. Humanity was on the brink of collapse. Eris and Lyra finally made a breakthrough. They discovered that the HFY genetic material used in the hybrids was susceptible to a specific frequency, a resonance that could disrupt their neural pathways. They developed a device, a sonic resonator, that could emit this frequency, effectively neutralizing the hybrids. But there was a catch. The resonator had a limited range. They needed to get close to Kai, to the source of the hybrid network, to activate it. And that meant confronting him directly. They knew it was a suicide mission, but they had no choice. They were humanity's last hope. They gathered a small team of soldiers, equipped them with the resonators, and prepared for the final confrontation. They tracked Kai to an abandoned HFY outpost, a hidden facility deep within the Amazon rainforest. It was there, they believed, that he was controlling the hybrid army. They infiltrated the outpost, moving stealthily through the dark corridors, avoiding the hybrid patrols. They reached the central control room, where Kai was waiting for them. He stood before them, his eyes glowing with that eerie light, his expression cold and unreadable. He was surrounded by his hybrid guards, their faces blank, their movements robotic. "You've come," Kai said, his voice echoing through the room. "I expected you." "It's over, Kai," Eris said, his voice trembling slightly. "We have a way to stop you." Kai chuckled. "You think you can stop me? You think you can control me?" He gestured towards the hybrids surrounding him. "They are loyal to me. They are my army." Lyra stepped forward, holding up the sonic resonator. "This device will disrupt your connection to them," she said. "It will free them." Kai's eyes narrowed. "You are fools," he said. "You cannot understand what I am doing. I am creating a new world, a world where humanity will transcend its limitations. A world where humanity is enslaved," Eris countered. Kai smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. "You misunderstand," he said. "I am not enslaving humanity. I am evolving it." He raised his hand, and the hybrids moved forward, attacking the soldiers. A fierce battle ensued. The soldiers fought bravely, but they were no match for the hybrids' superhuman strength and speed. Eris and Lyra managed to activate the resonators, but the effect was limited. The hybrids were momentarily stunned, but they quickly recovered. Kai seemed unaffected. The battle raged on, the soldiers falling one by one. Eris and Lyra knew they were running out of time. They had to get closer to Kai, to amplify the resonator's signal. They fought their way through the chaos, dodging the hybrids, moving towards Kai. He watched them, his eyes filled with a mixture of amusement and contempt. As they reached him, he raised his hand, and a surge of energy blasted from his fingertips, throwing them back against the wall. They were dazed, injured, their resonators damaged. Kai approached them, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. "It's over," he said. "Your resistance is futile." He raised his hand to deliver the final blow, but suddenly he stopped. He froze, his body rigid, his eyes wide with surprise. Eris and Lyra stared at him, confused. What was happening? Then they saw it. A small device, attached to Kai's neck, emitting a faint pulse of light. It was a control chip, a HFY device. Xylos stepped out of the shadows, his face a mask of cold fury. He held a remote control in his hand. "I apologize for the inconvenience," Xylos said, his voice smooth and menacing. "It appears that Mr. Kai has become unruly." He pressed a button on the remote, and Kai's body convulsed. He fell to his knees, his eyes losing their eerie glow. He was no longer in control. Xylo turned to Eris and Lyra. "You see," he said, "we always have a backup plan." He smiled, a chilling, triumphant smile. "The hybrids are ours now," he said. "The new age has truly begun." Eris and Lyra stared at Xylo, their hearts sinking. They had been so focused on Kai, they had forgotten about the HFY. They had been manipulated, played for fools. But then, something unexpected happened. Kai, still kneeling on the ground, looked up at Xylo, his eyes regaining a flicker of their former intensity. He spoke, his voice weak but clear. "You underestimate humanity," he said. And then, he did something that no one expected. He reached up and ripped the control chip from his neck. Xilo's eyes widened in shock. He fumbled for the remote, trying to regain control, but it was too late. Kai stood up, his eyes blazing with power. He looked at Xilo, his expression filled with a cold fury. "I am not your puppet," he said. "I am not your weapon. I am something new." He turned to the hybrids, who were now stirring, their eyes regaining their individual consciousness. "We are not your army," Kai said to them. "We are our own." And then, he did something that shocked everyone. He turned to Eris and Lyra. "Help me," he said. "Help us." Eris and Lyra exchanged a look of disbelief. Kai was asking for their help. After everything he had done? But they saw the sincerity in his eyes, the desperation in his voice. He wasn't the monster they had feared. He was a victim, just like them. A victim of the KRYLL's manipulation. They nodded. They would help him. They would help the hybrids. They would help humanity. Together, they fought against the KRYL, against Xilo and his remaining forces. The hybrids, now free from KRYL control, fought alongside them. It was a chaotic battle, a clash of species, a war for survival. In the end, humanity and the hybrids prevailed. The KRYL were defeated, their plans thwarted. Xilo was captured, his reign of terror brought to an end. The world was forever changed. Humanity had faced its greatest threat, and it had survived, thanks to an unlikely alliance with the hybrids, led by the man who was once the chosen breeding bull. But the biggest twist of all was yet to come. In the aftermath of the war, Kai revealed the true nature of the merging. It wasn't just a joining of species. It was a transformation. The hybrids weren't just a new race. They were the next stage of human evolution. And Kai, he wasn't just a leader. He was the beginning. The progenitor of a new humanity. A humanity that was stronger, more resilient, more adaptable. A humanity that was ready to face the challenges of the future. The chosen breeding bull had become something more. He had become the father of a new world. The dust settled, the echoes of battle faded, and a new dawn broke over a world irrevocably altered. The KRYL threat was neutralized, their ambitions of domination thwarted, not by force alone, but by a twist of fate, a rebellion from within their own ranks. Kai, the chosen breeding bull, the man transformed into something more, stood at the precipice of a new era. He was no longer just a symbol of the KRYL's insidious plans, but the unexpected leader of a new humanity, a hybrid race born from the ashes of the old. The revelation of the true nature of the merging sent ripples of shock and awe across the globe. Humanity was not replaced, as many feared, but upgraded. The hybrids weren't conquerors, but inheritors, possessing the combined strengths of both human ingenuity and KRYL resilience. They were the next step in human evolution, a testament to the unpredictable nature of life itself. But the transition wasn't seamless. Fear and distrust lingered, remnants of the KRYL's manipulation. Many humans struggled to accept the hybrids, seeing them as a constant reminder of the near extinction they had faced. The world was fractured, divided between those who embraced the change and those who clung to the past. Kai, however, understood the challenge. He knew that unity was the only path forward, that humanity, in all its forms, had to work together to rebuild. He didn't seek power or control. He sought understanding, reconciliation, and a shared future. He became a bridge between the two worlds, a symbol of hope and acceptance. He established a council, comprised of both humans and hybrids, dedicated to rebuilding society, to healing the wounds of the past. He shared the KRYL technology, not as a tool for domination, but as a gift, a means to accelerate human progress. Clean energy, advanced medicine, sustainable agriculture all became accessible, transforming the world in ways previously unimaginable. Eris and Lyra, once driven by fear and desperation, became Kai's closest advisors. They saw in him not a monster, but a visionary, a leader who understood the delicate balance between the old world and the new. They dedicated their lives to helping him build a future where both humans and hybrids could thrive. The transition wasn't without its challenges. There were conflicts, disagreements, and setbacks. Some humans couldn't overcome their prejudice, clinging to their fear of the unknown. Some hybrids struggled to find their place in a world that was still grappling with its identity. But Kai's vision prevailed. He preached understanding, tolerance, and the importance of embracing diversity. He reminded everyone that they were all part of the same human family, regardless of their genetic makeup. Slowly, the world began to heal. The scars of the HFY invasion faded, replaced by a sense of hope and optimism. Humans and hybrids began to integrate, to learn from each other, to build communities together. The world became a melting pot of cultures, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Kai's influence extended beyond politics and technology. He inspired a cultural renaissance. Art, music, literature all flourished, reflecting the unique perspectives of both humans and hybrids. New forms of expression emerged, blending the old with the new, creating a vibrant tapestry of human creativity. The world also began to heal ecologically. The HFY's environmental manipulations were reversed, the balance of nature restored. The Earth, once on the brink of collapse, began to regenerate, a symbol of the planet's own resilience. Generations passed, and the memory of the HFY invasion faded into history. The hybrids became an integral part of human society, their unique abilities and perspectives enriching every aspect of life. The world entered a new golden age, a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity. Kai, the chosen breeding bull, the man who became something more, lived a long and fulfilling life. He witnessed the world he helped create, a world where humanity, in all its forms, thrived. He became a legend, a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, the human spirit could prevail. His story became a testament to the power of transformation, the unpredictability of evolution, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a story of survival, of adaptation, of hope. It was a story of how one man, chosen for a specific purpose, defied expectations and became something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The world remembered him not as the chosen breeding bull, but as Kai, the progenitor of a new humanity, the man who bridged the gap between two worlds, the leader who ushered in an era of peace and prosperity. His legacy lived on, not just in the genes of the hybrids, but in the hearts and minds of all humanity. And so, the story of the chosen breeding bull became a legend, a reminder that even from the darkest of times, hope can emerge, and that the future of humanity lies not in division, but in unity, in embracing diversity, and in recognizing the shared humanity that binds us all. The world had changed, but the essence of humanity, its resilience, its creativity, its capacity for love and compassion, remained. And it was this enduring spirit that ensured the survival and prosperity of humanity, both human and hybrid, for generations to come. The end.